guests from question one and question two. We are doing a public forum on the ballot initiative that is going to be on Tuesday, April 5th's ballot. There are three municipal questions on that ballot. One of them is in regards to the water bonds. Another one is in regards to health bonds. And then another one, question three, is in regards to the vacation of some parkland that is up north of the river along Searcy Creek Parkway. So those are the three questions that Kansas City will be voting on April 5th, which is next Tuesday. So with that, we're going to open up our Zoom conference, I believe, and we're going to be able to take questions through chat. Sorry, I won't hold my. Some people say I should hold my clipboard up like that because it blocks my face, but otherwise, we are also being simulcast on One Kansas City Radio, which is a local nonprofit radio station headquartered at the Northeast News, the world headquarters of the Northeast News, if you will. And it is at 100.1 on your FM dial, and onekansascity.org, I believe, is the. If you find One Kansas City Radio on Facebook, that's where you're going to find this live stream. And then we'll be picking it up and broadcasting it after it's done on our Facebook page for Kansas City Northeast News. So we're just going to dive right in. I'm going to go ahead and read question. It's question one, correct? Okay. I'm going to read question one. This is the way that this is going to appear on the ballot. Shall the city of Kansas City, Missouri, issue sanitary sewer revenue bonds in the principal amount of $750 million, correct? $750 million for the purpose of, there's just a lot of zeros, so I get lost with those zeros. For the purpose of rehabilitating, expanding, and improving the city's sanitary sewer system, including acquiring necessary land and rights of way in order to provide for its continuing operation and to maintain compliance with federal, state, and judicial requirements, with the principal of and interest on said revenue bonds to be payable solely from the derived revenues by the city from an operation of its sanitary sewer system. There's a lot to read here, including all future rehabilitations, improvements, and expansions thereto. So that's what you're going to see on the ballot for question one. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to one of our guest speakers, Wes Minder. He's going to give us a little bit of an overview, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. Wes, what can you tell us a little bit about question one?
Good evening. Again, my name is Wes Minder. I'm the Director of Water Services, and we appreciate the opportunity to come down here and visit with you about this bond issue on the ballot on Tuesday. So just a quick overview. Kansas City, Missouri is water department is actually three separate utilities that are funded through three different sources. We have drinking water, wastewater, and then we also have stormwater. And so this ballot measure it only impacts the stormwater or the sanitary sewer measure of our operating utility. Back in 2010, we were forced into a consent decree from the United States Environmental Protection Act because we have a combined sewer system. And what that is basically your sanitary system, when you flush your toilet, is also connected to the storm drains out in the street. And that works great, except when it rains. When it rains, the system gets overwhelmed and we send bad stuff into the Blue River and the Missouri River. So we were dictated with a and we do have at www.kcwater.us. We do have kind of an FAQ page on here that refers to a lot of this and some learn more. And then we also have some contact information if any of you have any additional questions for our communications team. But basically, the original plan on that was to come into every single neighborhood and dig up the storm and sanitary pipes and put new ones back in and have two sets of systems so that it was completely separated. Since then, we've done some projects. We've done some down in Marlboro. We've done some improvements. We've got a major project going on down in the Blue River at our wastewater treatment plant that's currently under construction. And we've been able to work with the EPA and modify that consent decree and dropped our estimated cost from $4.5 billion down to $2.3 billion. So we've been able to do that by using more natural stormwater type control facilities, which are, instead of just piping everything, we will send stuff to an area, let the water sit, let it infiltrate. And so we've dropped our estimated cost about $2.3 billion. And because we made such good progress, since we've got a pretty good team of engineers and designers, and our consultant and contracting community in Kansas City came together. And we did such a good job. The EPA allowed us to take this new innovative green approach, and then also give us 5 more years. We were supposed to be done by 2035. We now have until 2040. So we a lot of these things that we're doing right now, the Blue River plant and other investments, they're going to be 50-year-old assets. They're going to last at least 50 years. This sewer bond authorization, we have 3 different ways to finance our improvement, 4 different ways actually. We have pay as you go, so we basically have to accumulate all the cash and then put it into a project. Downfall of that is it takes a little bit longer to do stuff, and then also with just every year, it doesn't matter. Construction goes up 3 to 5% a year, just because the cost of labor, it keeps going up. The problem we're having right now is just with the supply chain, and then just demand and the economy being the way it is. We're seeing inflation costs that are pretty incredible, double digits. And so that a pay-as-you-go financing thing basically means you wait longer, and you have to that cost has to be done by 2040. So if we do as a pay-as-you-go, we would actually have to raise rates to raise all that cash by 2040. What this revenue bond authorization does is it gives us the authorization. It doesn't say that we will issue immediately, but it gives us the authorization over the next 18 years to issue up to $750 million worth of revenue bonds. And so those bonds will be paid out over 25 years. And so we're able to take the costs to make our system compliant and where it's not sending bad stuff into the river. We're able to spread that cost out over future ratepayers, because when we spend this money that we're spending right now on the Blue River wastewater plant, that plant's going to last 25 to 50 years. So we're able to use a 25-year bond to pay for an asset that's going to exceed the life of that. And so it spreads out that cost, allows us to keep rates a little more manageable increase. We also have general obligation bonds, revenue bonds, which is what we're asking for. And then, Michael, what's the third one? Michael Grimaldi has been a great blessing. Regulatory bonds. So we have options. And so regulatory expense bonds. And so revenue bonds get the best rates for our ratepayers, because when we go to market to sell it, those bonds are backed by future revenue sources. And we all know we are always going to need water and sewer. And so those are very safe, stable investments. So we're able to get really good rates on that, which again keeps our costs down, allows us to do more stuff. And so this that's what we're asking the request to allow us the ability to issue up to $750 million worth of revenue bonds backed by the ratepayers for their sanitary expenses to continue doing our consent decree. And that's not just a concentrated thing. We have projects all over the city. We have places where we have infiltration, north of the river and down east and down south, where water will leach into the system. So we're lining those to reduce, because everything winds up at Blue River. So we're going to stop that, reduce our flows. It's all part of the project. So the project benefits the entire city. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Michael, I don't know if I missed any major points here. Okay. You can fire away. I'm pretty open-ended. Whatever works best for you.
Thank you. Wes, you had mentioned something that it will all end up in the Blue River anyway. So could you clarify that statement, please?
So right now, if we get like a 2 or 3 inch rain, everything will overflow the system and wind up in the Blue River, because that's just the way it was designed. And so what this will do is it will allow the improvements to where it goes to the Blue River wastewater treatment plant, where we can treat the E. coli and all the bad bacteria and stuff. We can treat it, disinfect it, and then release it out into the Missouri River under acceptable terms. And so right now, if we get a big rain, sewage, and bacteria goes straight into the Blue River and the Missouri River. What this does is basically stops those overflows, sends it to treatment, and then releases it. And so that's how we improve the water quality of the area.
And just a point of observation, Blue River, is that the plant that's down by Bayer?
Yes, Blue River is down by the Hawthorne plant in Bear.
Yeah, which is very close to the mouth of the Missouri River, so you're getting it right before it goes in.
Correct. Everything. We have 4 plants north of the river. South of the river, we have the Blue River one because everything drains to 435 in the Hawthorne plant.
What kind of effect will this have on our city's bond ratings, and why should that matter to the city's taxpayers right now? We've heard a lot of talk in previous elections like this about, well, what this is going to drive the bonds up, or it's going to have a negative impact on the bonds. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Revenue bonds, since they're backed by ratepayers, are considered, it would not impact the city's general obligation bond ratings. And so it's more of from a bond rating perspective, the revenue bonds will, are the best way to keep our bond rating where it is. Because when we go to sell these on the market, it's a revenue bond based upon rates. And since we know we have 127,000 or 137,000 customers, when somebody goes to buy these bonds, they know that they have that number of customers, they're paying this much. The cash flow to repay those bonds are a lot more stable than, say, general obligation bonds, which are relying on sales taxes, earnings taxes, property taxes, which can, we saw with COVID, can fluctuate.
Why now? There's a primary election in August that would hopefully, it's a general in November, but that would hopefully garner more of a turnout than a single issue municipal ballot. And I guess from a predictive standpoint, you're looking at probably 11 to 17% tops. So maybe explain to the listeners and our readers why now and why it's important right now.
I think just from a historical perspective, since April is a municipal election, that's when we target to do that sort of thing. Since this is a revenue bond, it's, there's no tax increase. It's just basically using future rates as the collateral for it. There's actually no, change to, it's not like we're coming and asking for additional money. We're just asking for the authorization to use our projected future revenue flows to accelerate the cash now so that we can get those projects done.
I'm Michael Grimaldi. I'm also with the Water Department I work in the Communications Division. One other factor is that the last time we issued wastewater sewer bonds was in 2012, last time voters authorized them was in 2012. The city council has basically spent out as much as was authorized at that time. They did 5 issues. It was a $500 million authorization at that point, and it's been, I think, over a period of 10 years. They did about $100 million every couple of years, more or less, to pay for the projects such as what we call the smart sewer, the consent decree compliance work. And that money's gone. So we need to reauthorize those bonds.
Is there anything else that is going to directly impact water users in the city in terms of rates? Or let's talk about rates. Rates have been going up. What is this going to do to rates? And according to the information that was released, this is going to help stabilize rates. So can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes, I think that's so we have to have this plan done by 2040. And so there was a cost of service study that we did a few years ago that looked at stuff. One of the things that I'm tasked with as, new leadership at the water department is trying to make sure that we spend those investments wisely, get our costs a little more under control. The revenue bond authorization, because it allows us to pay these investments out over 25 years, will keep the rate increases lower because we're able to spread those costs out past that 2040 deadline. So if we had to get this all done by 2040 and we had to do it with cash, we would have to ramp up really quick in order to get these improvements done that we're required to do. By using a 25-year revenue bond, we're able to spread those paybacks out over time, which allow those rate increases to remain a little more manageable. Michael, I don't know if you...
Yeah, one of the reasons rates went up a lot in the middle of the last decade, 2015 to 2018, was the fact that we had to pay for these for the sewer consent decree, sewer bond work. And when the water department and the mayor at the time, Sly James, looked at that, they said, "Wait a minute, can we do something about that?" They convened a task force. In fact, Mr. Wagner was the chair of that task force. He's here tonight. That task force, over a period of 13, 14 months, recommended, among other things, go back to the EPA and see if we can do something about that. And that led to the reduction in the total cost over the period, plus the extension to 5 years that Wes referred to earlier. So instead of 4.7 billion, it's going to be 2.3 billion, more or less. The rate increases, what authorization of this bond by the voters will do will enable us to manage that, as Wes explained. Instead of having some of those years where we got to do this work because we have to meet the consent decree, we'll be saying, okay, we're going to shoot for this target. The target is to keep the wastewater portion of your water bill, which, if anybody looks at your water bill, it's the biggest part of your water bill. And to keep that at about 6% a year is the target. No promises, because the economy is what it is, and we have to kind of roll with the punches on that. But with the authorization of these bonds, our finance folks are telling us we should be able to manage it at a 6% increase for the foreseeable future.
And my apologies, Scott Wagner with NEAT as part of the Mattie Road Center, another co-sponsor. So my mea culpa. And I already do, don't I? We're already seeing. Let's just talk about Waldo. Let's talk about Warnell Road. And yeah, I know, right? We're already seeing huge issues. Warnell Road has been described by many as looking like France after the Great War. And so, what kind of example will that change? Will that kind of effect expand over the city? Are there going to be more locations like that? And I guess, how can that be avoided?
Are you talking about construction that's underway?
Right.
Well, and unfortunately, and where I live, the road in front of my house has been closed for 2 years. So in my detour, I don't live in an area with a grid system. So unfortunately, construction is, just it's the way things are. Most of these improvements that we have to do are in the major kind of the big project that we have coming down the pipe from a combined sewer standpoint is in the Town Fork Creek area, which is down near 63rd and Paseo. And so there's a couple things that happen. We're coordinating with other departments. The Public Works Department's getting ready to do some work on 63rd Street. We're working with them to have them, while they're during construction, integrate some of these, sewer separation things as part of the roadway project. We also have a lot of this work too is at our plants, or leading up to our plants, or on our receptors. And so a lot of that work will be done outside of it. Now, our water line replacement program, we try to do 28 miles a year. That's where we do impact the roads, and that's where it gets a little dicey. And so it's just, we're finishing up a project down in the plaza, which had a pretty substantial engagement, and restrictions, working with the contractor. And we're doing some of the work around on Main Street to upgrade the lines, as the streetcar construction is going on. So we do work with Public Works to try to coordinate as much as we can in order to make sure that, if we're coming in, ideally in a perfect world, which we've been working towards, we will come in, do the water line work, do the repairs, and Public Works can come in, resurface the road, so that when we're done with it, we have a smooth, complete thing. The days of us coming in after the fact, and ripping out something brand new, we're trying to avoid that. And then we're also using that on the water supply side. We're working with Public Works on getting their resurface lists and try to coordinate our program to where we're working on any lines that we know may be bad, so that Public Works doesn't go out, resurface a line, and then we have to come back a year or two later and we have 3 or 4 main breaks. So there's a lot of coordination going on, and that does happen.
That's good to hear, because I know that we had an issue here, and this may be unrelated, but in regards to resurfacing, crews came out and resurfaced about 1.25 miles of Independence Avenue between Benton and, say, Jackson, maybe Van Brunt. And not 2 weeks later, it was torn up for utility work. And I don't know whether it was water or who, but that is an issue. And I'm glad to hear that more coordination is.
Just to give you a little background, I spent my first 10 years at the city in public works, and the current public works director, Michael Shaw, he and I actually used to be in the basement at 5,300 municipals. So he and I have been working together. So it's all pretty clean. We're both on the same, we don't want to, nobody wants to be stupid. So I guess you can put that in quotes.
Let's talk about oversight. And we kind of delved into that a little bit. What kind of spending oversight is in place to deter wasteful spending? Because there's an awful lot of critical, let's just say, thinkers, quote unquote. Well, there's 5 guys standing around a hole. Yeah, 1 guy in a hole digging. How is that a good use of money? So what kind of oversight is going to be put in place to, I guess, to protect the taxpayers?
So just to give you some context, as Mr. Wagner knows, I do have 7 children at home. And so there's a lot of water usage at my place. And so, and I don't get a city discount running the place. But so my background, again, being coming from public works, working in the manager's office before, I'm an engineer by trade, but I also have a master's in business. And so as I've come into the department 3 months in on the job, I've started asking a lot of those questions because, if we're going to spend a 50-year asset, and we've got issues, like we've got one plant that's in the floodplain now, and we're looking at different options. I'm asking the questions as the non-technical person from a 50-year life cycle cost of, like, does it make sense to be here, or does it make sense to move up here? Just kind of a weird story. The way our system works, it's really all connected because I live up in the Platte County area. Well, the way my sewage flows is it will come down to Riverside and it'll wind up on the West Bottoms, or it might wind up in Birmingham where it gets pumped across the river to the Blue River plant. And then we pump it back across to the Birmingham plant, and then we spread it out on the farm. So there's stuff like that when we're looking at this, that I'm going to evaluate and ask, like, what's the 25-year cost of electricity and pumps? And is it okay to keep sending stuff across the river? I mean, does it make sense? Is it, if it's, say, $1,000 a year to send it across the river, but it's $5,000 a year to build something up north, and obviously we want to do the $1,000 thing. So that's just my background, just the way I've done things. And I think Mr. Wagner has worked with me pretty well to know that, I don't like, if you give us this authorization, I'd rather build 10 things with $10 million than one thing with $10 million. So that's just my personal thing. And as we work through, the new executive team at the water department, we're looking at, potential, kind of internal type auditing type stuff to just keep track of that, because that's one thing that I think that we need to do, a better job of, looking at that sort of stuff.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball, because you said spread it out on the farm, and we are talking about wastewater. There's been, and this is just out of the clear blue sky, on social media, this has been discussed ad nauseum. I'm gonna tell you that. What stinks? What is that smell? And my response to that is, knowing probably not enough, is that the water department is burning things off over at the Blue River plant. And so can you talk about, is that the smell that we're smelling, spreading it out on the farm, or what exactly is that?
Well, I would blame Ingredient in North Kansas City and Bear for that, but and the freeze thaw cycle. No. So yes, the way the Blue River wastewater plant worked previously, we would send everything down and we would incinerate the waste. And we would generate what we call Class B sludge. So the dirty stuff in the wastewater is Class B, which means it cannot be used or anywhere near humans. So our investment in the Blue River wastewater treatment biosolids facility will eliminate the incinerating and we'll actually treat the sludge to where it's Class A, to where we may potentially, which Class A sludge can be used for fertilizer. The city of Milwaukee sells their sludge as a commercial project called Millargonite. So our new facility will allow us the ability to potentially revenue capture by selling that product to somebody if we could find a partner on that, and would eliminate the incineration that you're smelling. And then also we would not be spreading it out as liberally as we are up in the Birmingham area. So, and the gas. We're also looking at potential, we're currently looking at a public-private partnership. So we generate gas when we do, all this is chemical stuff. So generate some sort of gas. And we're looking at potential options to capture that gas and sell it back to Spire as a byproduct of natural gas to use. So there's things we're working on for revenue capture, but then it also fits in with the climate and sustainability goals.
Wow. That's what, and I'm just, no, I'm not going to go all conspiracy theorist. Nothing to worry about in terms of what happened up in Cameron, Missouri. Or is that a completely unrelated with the hexachromium? What's that sludge that they spread out on the cornfields and they had brain tumors or so? Nothing. Whatever that, I can't remember. It was Lauren Brozovich or whoever it was. Was that Brockovich? Here, we have a question.
Hi, thank you guys for being here tonight. I have a couple questions. One, so I recently moved into the Indian Mountain neighborhood, and like my neighbors, my house is about 115 years old. When can we see, wastewater and things improving in our historic neighborhoods? Some of these systems are very, very old, as I'm sure you know, and could really use some improvements, which I've heard a couple neighbors recently complaining about their stuff backing up. So
So I know in a lot of areas we're doing, a lot of our sewer pipes were clay pipes, and they were set 100 and some years ago. And so there's been settled, and we've actually done lining in place, which essentially sends a balloon into that system, blows it up, it hardens, and that provides a smooth, way for stuff to get away from there. Backups are kind of tied into overflows. If you get sewage is like, Independence Avenue and the freeways. If you get too many cars on it, it backs up. And so that's part of the problem. We do have we did have a program where we were, it was the, it's not Keep Out the Rain. We had another program where we actually partnered. We had to suspend it during COVID because people weren't exactly wanting people to come into their house. Our Keeping Out the Rain program it was a free service where people could come out, and a lot of our problems are downspouts were sent into there. So we're throwing more rain in there. So we would separate the downspouts, but then also provide some backflow preventers. And so if you, at kcwater.us, if you want to reach out to communications team, we can find more information on that so you can share it with your neighborhood.
Yeah, pardon my voice tonight. If you look at, and I was looking on my phone because I can't remember but the smart sewer program, if you just Googled KCMO smart sewer, there's an interactive map on there, and you can, oh, sorry. I usually stand. My head's been cut off most of my life. There's an interactive map. If you go KCMO smart sewer, there's a interactive map where you can zoom into your neighborhood and see what work has already been done to improve as part of the consent decree work. In terms of wastewater pipes that need repair, which may be the case, anytime you have a backup, call 311. That's a real important tracking mechanism we have. When we get 20 calls on the same block, we might have an issue. So that's the thing that moves it up on the list. Our engineers have a 5-year capital improvement program. It's updated annually, including on the wastewater side, also on the water side, and I guess stormwater too. And they'll look at, it's updated annually, and things will move up the list and down the list depending on priorities. So the wastewater repair division, we've got parts of town that still have septic systems, I was shocked to learn that. And we've got a big project, 55th and Bennington, I hope will be moving along here soon, shortly. So Yeah, anytime you have an issue, call 311 so that it gets into the system and we can start taking a look at it.
This falls under the category of these are those boring infrastructure projects. I mean, we're talking about water. How excited can you get about water? And it's one of the things that I've written editorials about. Let's just keep it basic. Let's improve the infrastructure, and maybe we get some shiny stuff along with it. But what do you say to critics of this bond issue right now? Why do we need this? Why they're going to raise our rates? They're going to raise our taxes, or what's your bullet point list, I guess, for the critics of this bond plan or of this bond issue?
I think the key thing is the bond issue again allows us to spread these costs out over 25 years, as opposed to having to come out and do it right now and generate the cash for it. And so it's one thing to do something speculative on something that you think that, you may get the payback. There's plenty of good examples, where we've done, general obligation bonds on speculative type things. In this case, we know we're going to have to spend money, on a Birmingham treatment plant in the Town Fork Creek area, on our, lining of our existing pipes to stop the infiltration all over the city. We know we're going to have to do that cost. And so the bond authorization basically, again, spreads those costs out over 25 years. So, somebody, my grandkids, they may buy a house, we've lined that sewer, that plastic lining's going to last long time. So they get the benefit of the lined sewers, and they're also paying for it. And so it's just a way to kind of do that. And so to the critics on that, this isn't like a speculative thing that's backed by, this is, basically just using future revenue flows to pay for those bonds. So
just real quick, since we are right above the East Bottoms and you've got a treatment plant that's undergoing, it's a water plant down on Nicholson, correct? Pump station. Can briefly tell us, because I know we get some questions on a weekly basis about what's going on down there. Walk us through real quick what's going on down there.
So we have we've got our main intake plant near North Kansas City. It's where all of our water comes from. We have individual pump stations. That's the great thing about 317 square miles and a big honking river through the middle of it. Our plant is down low, and so when you get up into some areas to get water pressure, obviously the water. That's why we have water towers, to get the pressure. We've had some replacement projects going on with some pumps down in the East Bottoms area, and so we have had some low pressure problems. And so that we are replacing and modernizing a couple of those pump stations. But the way our system's set up, we will always provide water. We just can't provide it at the pressure that you're normally used to. And we have an actual water modeling software and a water modeling engineer that will plug in stuff like, if we take this pump down, what's the impact? And they can do those sort of sensitivity analysis. And so that work, I believe, is getting close to being wrapped up. And so a lot of the problems that you've been having over the last couple of months should go away. But again, 311 is a great way to let us know, because there may be some stuff that we may have missed. I know we've been working with the VA hospital down on Van Brunt because they've had some pressure problems because of that. So the whole system's tied together, and but that work, from what I last heard, is wrapping up, and so hopefully you guys, your pressure will become stable like it was in the past.
So it sounds like you're saying if this bond issue doesn't get passed, it will be more of an immediate burden on customers. Is that correct? Like those other options would be more expensive for the customer? Okay. And you mentioned a 25 to 50 year lifespan for some of these projects. Is there any way to prolong that? Is there any, type of new thing that could make that last longer and maybe save us some money in the long run?
Well, I think the big thing is some of our green solutions, to where we can, when we work on, we're going to work on this Town Fork Creek project, we have some park property and a greenway that we can use. So if we do something to where we're basically, excavating an area for the stormwater to go, that's going to last as long as it's there. We may have to come in and clean out some silt, every 10, 15 years or so, do some cleanup. Another thing too that we would include in these projects is, a lot of water quality issues involve litter. And so what type of screening structures can we use that allow us to collect all the plastics that are floating away in so that we can haul them off and so that they're not, winding up down in the Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, pumps, energy and moving, they're just, we have actually 6 intake pumps at the down there by the downtown airport. We're going to replace 2 of them. They're about $150,000 to $200,000 a piece, and the ones we have we're putting in the 70s. So we've got our money's worth out of those. But the cost of these pumps, that's the biggest thing, and if we can get them to last, but as much energy, they just, they're not made to last forever. But we that's where some of these, lining using the the plastic balloon, I'll just call it a balloon because that's an easy way to explain it. By using that stuff, plastic underground, not getting the sun, will last probably, outlast a lot of people. So those are kind of the things that we try to look at, because again, we know we have limited amount of money. So we want to make sure that we meet this consent decree while staying within what we've said, is going to be that $2.3 billion.
I just feel like the step and fetch it guy here.
Is there anything that residents can do, in their yards, when they are taking water out of their gutters, to kind of ease the burden on the wastewater system?
Well, obviously, if your house is 100 years old, we like the water to go out in the yard and soak in, but you want it far enough away of the house it doesn't wind up in the basement. So, rain barrels are always good. If you can, that's a great system to do it. But I think the key thing is just making sure the gutters are not connected straight into the sewer system. And then also too, if you can keep them, my house, the way it sits is one of my gutters comes down and it was set up to run onto the driveway into the street. And so it's just a little $5 piece to run it over towards the neighbor's house. So, but it is in a low spot. So, and both of our basements do have walkouts. So
we're about 40 minutes in, and do we have anybody from health? Okay. I'm just going to throw out another question because this is just something I hear and something I see. And then when I ask about it, I get told that it's cheaper. When I drive by and I see water leaks in the street that have been running for a week and nobody's working on them, and when you call the water department, they say, well, it's cheaper to let it run. We can let it run cheaper than we can send somebody out immediately to fix it. And then it's scheduled. Can you speak a little bit? Am I making sense? Yeah. Okay, good.
We have 3 different codes of water main breaks, so obviously if there's a water main that goes to, which we actually did have a break out to Arrowhead Stadium during game day, we got out there, fixed it immediately. We have different levels of breaks depending on users. Obviously if we have hospitals, we have leaks. Right now we have it's probably the one thing that it actually has woken me up a couple times at night. We have I saw a graphic one time. Ordinarily we have about 10 to 12 vacant positions in our pipeline operations. In the past, we used to have about a 70% response rate within 24 hours of a major break being reported. That graph shows, vacancies here. Well, in the last 2-3 years, because of wages, our vacancies have shot up to 36. Our 24-hour response time has gone down from 69% down to 42%. So we are having a huge workload problem. We have people that are, we have people working 16-hour shifts at a water plant. The city council just recently passed a pay adjustment ordinance, but we are having a hard time competing with warehouses and other types of vendors. So part of the problem with leaks that we're having right now is just workload. And so we have to look at potentially using outside contractors, which is not great because they cost us more money. And so anything, we're more than happy to reach out to any groups for, just trying to, let people know that we have positions. You can show up. We'll be more than happy to get you work. Okay, thank you. Message acknowledged. We are also trying to, again, we have, being the new guy, we've got some stuff that we're just trying to think of long term. We're working together. Public Works has the same problems. Snow removal. We had to bring people off our stuff because Public Works is short 59 drivers. So we provided, in fact, I even overnight went on a snow route. So we are providing people to help out public works while trying to maintain access. Our problem with that is, when it gets cold, your pipes burst. So I can't have my meter field services people go plow snow because they need to be ready to go out and turn off valves if people call in with broken water lines. So we're like a lot of other people. We are having some staffing challenges on that. And so I think a lot of the stuff you're seeing, we are essentially triaging because we just don't have the ability to get out there. One thing too, the water rates have gone up too, but we are now replacing 28 miles of water line a year. Our system's 2,800 miles. So we're trying to replace 1% of our system every year. We've been doing that the last 10 years and targeting those, everything's data driven on the water main breaks. And so we look at lines that have a high rate of failure and a high consequence of failure. And that's where our program has been investing in replacing things.
Can you talk a little bit to that triage system, that scaled or staged, if you will? What's A, B, C, and what are the equations for that?
I don't know the exact specifics, but at a high level, like a class 1 or an A or whatever we call it, that's something where that would be like, say, a 16 or 24-inch main that's shooting a lot of water out. Yeah, be on the 10 o'clock news. So the way our system works, we have our main plant. We have 2 tunnels underneath the Missouri River. They're 8 to 10 feet in diameter. They're monster. As you go north on North Oak, by Cascones, we recently put a 54-inch main there. So as you get further away, those lines get smaller. And so if any of those larger transmission mains break, those get the priority. And then we have our smaller, 8 and 12 inch, which is what you get your water to your house out. Those would be kind of more on the lower tier, unless we know that, there's a school or a hospital or some life safety or fire station. So that's the kind of stuff we look at when we look at that. But if, a 24 blows, everybody knows it's going to blow, and we'll be out there as fast as we can.
I want to do a U-turn right back into the bond issue. You talked about staffing. How much of those bonds, will any of it be used for staffing, or will it be all used for hard infrastructure needs?
It would be all used for hard infrastructure needs because, again, it's a 25-year bond. So the bond should last as long, or, the life of the asset. And so we would just use our normal, we have multiple different financing mechanisms. So we use the cash flow. And so all of our existing operations are paid for by, current things. This is just what we would use as far as future revenues to do it. So, we have, let's see, I think we currently have 260 positions. Out of those 260 positions that are vacant, about approximately 150 of them are labor class that are actually out. The ones that are doing either your inspection, your pipeline repair, your stormwater cleanouts, or your sanitary sewer service.
The blue truck guy.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? One more, and then we'll wrap with water and go straight to health.
Straight to where?
Health.
Oh, straight to health. Excuse me. I thought you said something else. But earlier, Wes, you had mentioned global climate change standards. And as an urban planner, I realize that many cities are addressing that very issue. But what is the primary or the best practices guideline that you all are following that's out there?
So I think the big thing is just the resiliency. And so using open channels, open storage, where water can sit and infiltrate. That's that's the way we've been able to get the EPA to agree to let us reduce that cost. And so down in the West Bottoms by Hy-Vee Arena, we, that's a big problem. Everything from downtown winds up in the West Bottoms. We recently did a project where we basically did a stormwater detention basin down there. And then we also added a trail and a boardwalk and some native planting type things, so that we have a tree canopy that would then, in theory, right, the water comes in, sits, trees suck it up faster. And so that's kind of some of the stuff that we're looking at. The Town Fork Creek project down there, down at the 63rd and Paseo area, personally as an engineer and a designer, I'm looking forward to, because we can come in and do a a lot of, Town Fork Creek was channelized and concreted during the Pendergast era. We can come in and unconcrete that. But then also when we get done with it, works with our Parks Department and our city councils and some additional funding to basically create an amenity out of what we invest in. So there's a little stuff that we're trying to do that it's not going to cost. We don't want it to cost a lot because we have some constraints on that. But if we work with our partners, we can figure out ways that when we are in there mobilized doing stuff, we can kind of, add something that leave something for the communities so that we're just not spending money going in, as you mentioned, you don't see when pipes are underground, you don't see it. But this new method of using more infiltration versus conveyance and treatment, that's where a lot of that resiliency comes in.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. My wife was actually the chair of a panel called the Wet Weather Community Panel. She did that for the better part of 5 years in about 2005 to 2010, more or less, leading up to the consent decree. And they made some conscious decisions at that time because they looked and said, all right, we've got to stop this sewage overflow problem with these combined sewers that includes 58 square miles of our city, including this, the northeast part of town. And they said, well, we could put in pipes. We could put in retention ponds and do it that way. We could build a lot of concrete. And then somebody said, well, what about green? And they made a conscious decision to advocate for the green infrastructure approach. Green infrastructure is at the heart of the smart sewer program and the consent decree compliance. It's by keeping the water in the ground instead of just holding it or pumping it into the river or treating it. We are making it much more efficient in terms of the environmental and the climate impact approach to that. We were one of the first cities in the nation. There's about 40 or 50 cities, I think, that are under similar consent decrees because they have combined sewers. Combined sewers were cutting edge a century ago. And then all of a sudden in metropolitan areas, the dilution as a solution is not really a good solution, we found out, when you have so many more people. So, we were one of the first to get the EPA to agree to a green infrastructure approach. So if you go to the pilot project for this was the Marlboro neighborhood of South Kansas City, basically from about 75th and Paseo south to about 85th, more or less, and east of Prospect over basically to the Blue River. And they took that neighborhood, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, it was a neighborhood that needed some picking up. The neat thing about green infrastructure is it not only helps clean the environment, it beautifies the environment. So what used to be basically a flat park and with just grass on it now has retention ponds or other kinds of waterfall effects, hold the water a little bit longer and keeps it from going straight to the river. All this you have to put in trees. That helps the air. So we have an outstanding landscape architect. Is Lisa? Is she an architect? Landscape architect named Lisa Treese, who's one of the spearhead people, and she has been for about 10 years on our green infrastructure project. If you go to that smart sewer website that I mentioned, look for this green infrastructure section, and you can read all you want about it. It's really a great section, learn all you want about how this is helping the climate and helping the environment, as well as improving our sewer system in Kansas City.
And I'm going to piggyback off of that just by saying, if you want an example of what this looks like, you've got an example right down here at the Nicholson plant, excuse me, where there was, and I wondered I'm down there 3 or 4 times a week, just passing by. And I was wondering what the hell is going on, but a nice little retention pond. There's a path around it. They've planted reeds and there's plantings in there. And I don't know if there's trees that have gone in yet, but it's very, very nice. And it's right down here in the East Bottoms, right off Nicholson, next to your water plant. So if anybody wants to see that, there's a personal example. Yes, there were 2 ball diamonds down there. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank Michael Grimaldi, Wes Mender from the Water Department. Thank you very much for coming and sitting overtime and filling the rest of the time answering questions about the water bonds and the water department in general. And so with that, I'm going to read question 2 so people know what question 2 is on the ballot. I understand that we were supposed to have somebody here, but they've been detained. So I'm just going to read this. Shall the city of Kansas City, Missouri be authorized to renew the current tax levy of 22 cents per $100 assessed valuation dedicated to ambulance services, emergency medical services, hospital, and public health purposes for a period of 9 years, with additional revenues to continue to be distributed as follows: the revenue derived from 3.5 cents of the levy to ambulance services, 3.5 cents for nonprofit health centers, and the revenue derived from 15 cents of the levy to the University of Health, which is formerly Truman Medical Center. And if anybody wants individual examples of those, obviously I just said Truman Med, but right here in historic Northeast, some of those funds go straight to the KC Care Clinic and the Samuel Rogers Clinic. And am I missing anybody else, Scott? Northland Healthcare Access and Swope Communities or Swope Health Services. Okay. So if you do have any additional questions on that, you can email us at the Northeast News, northeastnews@socket.net. And I'll just take this opportunity to thank our community partners. Again, Michael Grimaldi, Wes Minder from the Water Department, Scott Wagner with NEAT, one of our partners in this, Mike Spady, Lon with the Northeast Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, Abby Hoover, and what's that publisher guy's name with the Northeast News, and One Kansas City Radio, Gennard Polite, and what's your name? I'm sorry. Okay. Must have warrants. Anyway, so we're going to wrap this up. Please email those questions that you have to us, northeastnews@socket.net. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have a great night.
Wes, I will say we